The silence in the boardroom was deafening, broken only by the low hum of the projector and the sound of my career imploding. Silas, the new vice president, wasn't just firing me, he was toying with me. He slid a single manila file across the long mahogany table. It slid smoothly until it hit my chest with a soft thud. "We aren't letting you go, Audrey," he said, his smile too wide and far too predatory. "We have decided to reassign you. The Heritage Division needs a strong leader." The room gasped. I felt the blood drain from my face. The Heritage Division wasn't a real department, it was the corporate equivalent of a cemetery where careers went to die. It meant the basement archive. No budget. No staff. Just dust and obsolete products. "Your goal is to turn a 15% profit in 90 days with zero budget," he whispered, leaning in so only I could hear. "If you fail, I terminate you for cause and strip your stock options." He knew it was impossible. He wanted me to quit right there, to cry, to make a messy scene in front of the board. My hands shook under the table, my fingernails digging into my palms until they nearly bled. I took a deep breath, fighting the tears. I looked him dead in the eye. "I accept. My name is Audrey, and 3 months ago, I was the projected successor for the VP role that Silas now occupied. I had built this logistics department from the ground up. I wrote the code, I trained the staff, and I signed the biggest clients. But when the company merged, the board wanted fresh, disruptor energy. They brought in Silas, a man who spoke in buzzwords and knew nothing about the actual work." I flashed back to his first week. Silas had taken my presentation, put his name on the cover, and presented it as his own idea. I sat there in stunned silence as he took credit for 6 months of my sleepless nights. But the real war began the moment I corrected a data error he made in a client meeting. He looked at me with cold, dead eyes. He didn't want a partner, he wanted a servant who would nod and smile. Because I refused to bend, he decided to break me. He stripped my team away one by one. He excluded me from email chains. He criticized my tone. And now, this reassignment was his final blow. He was banking on my pride being too high to accept a demotion to the basement. He didn't realize that my pride was exactly why I wouldn't leave. Security escorted me, not out of the building, but down. We descended past the marble lobby, past the employee parking garage, all the way to sub-basement B. The air grew stale and cold. My office was a wire storage cage next to the massive, roaring HVAC unit. The flicker of the fluorescent light overhead was maddening, buzzing like a trapped fly. There was no computer, just a dusty landline phone and stacks of boxes labeled Product X, a legacy mechanical tool the company stopped marketing 5 years ago in favor of digital solutions. I sat on a stack of damp cardboard boxes, the humiliation washing over me like ice water. Upstairs, they were probably laughing. Silas sent a company-wide email welcoming me to my exciting new challenge in Heritage. It was a cruel joke to everyone but me. I stared at the concrete walls. I had no team, no computer access, and a product nobody wanted. But as I looked at the sheer volume of Product X crates surrounding me, a small spark lit in my chest. Silas thought this was trash. But I knew exactly what it was. It was inventory. And inventory meant potential money. I spent the first 3 days in a state of shock, staring at the gray wall. Silas expected me to resign by Friday. On Thursday, out of sheer boredom and a refusal to give him the satisfaction of seeing me leave, I started reading the old physical contracts in the boxes. I found the original charter for the Heritage Division. It was a 20-year-old document, yellowed with age. Buried deep in the legalese was a clause regarding autonomous operations. It stated clearly that if a division has zero allocated budget, the director, which was now me, had unrestricted authority over inventory liquidation and client communication methods without needing VP approval. I read it 3 times to be sure. My heart started to race. Silas hadn't read the old files. He was too arrogant to look at the details of the department he was mocking. He thought he had trapped me in a cage, but he had just handed me the keys to a weapon he didn't understand. I didn't need his permission to sell. I didn't need his permission to negotiate. As long as I didn't ask for money, I was the king of this basement. I needed customers, but Silas had locked me out of the CRM software on day one. I couldn't email our current clients or access the digital database. I felt stuck again until I looked in the back of the storage cage. There, covered in a thick layer of grime, was a metal filing cabinet. Inside, I found hundreds of Rolodex cards and physical client logs from 10 years ago. These were the old guard, blue-collar companies, construction firms, and warehouses that hated the switch to digital and had cancelled their contracts years ago. They didn't use the fancy apps Silas was trying to sell, they used phones and paper. They were the people the company had left behind. I dusted off the landline phone and checked for a dial tone. It hummed. I realized I wasn't going to sell them the new tech that Silas was pushing upstairs. I was going to sell them the thousands of units of Product X sitting in this basement. These were mechanical, durable, and reliable parts that Silas thought were garbage. I grabbed a pen and a notepad. I was going to do this the old-fashioned way. I picked up the phone for the first time. My voice shook slightly. I hadn't done cold calls in over a decade. I was used to high-level strategy meetings. The first 10 people hung up on me. Immediately. I felt foolish sitting in a cold basement, talking to a dial tone. But I dialed the 11th number. A gruff warehouse manager named Bert picked up. I haven't heard from your company in 6 years, Bert grumbled when I introduced myself. Yeah, well, the company forgot about me too, I admitted, dropping the polished corporate script. We talked for 20 minutes. He complained about how the new digital tools broke constantly and how much he missed the old mechanical units. I have 5,000 of the original mechanical units sitting right here, I told him. Brand new, in the box. I can give them to you at a 40% discount, cash on delivery. Bert went silent. You're serious? He asked. Dead serious, I said. He bought 50 units right then and there. It was only $5,000, a drop in the bucket compared to my quota, but when I hung up, I felt a surge of electricity I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't dead yet. Silas came down to the basement on Monday to check on my comfort. He saw the landline phone off the hook and frowned. He expected to see me packing my personal items. Instead, I was organizing boxes and creating a shipping lane with masking tape on the floor. He sneered, looking around with disgust. Don't get too cozy down here, Audrey. I need this space for server storage in 3 months. He kicked a box on his way out, leaving a muddy scuff mark on the cardboard. Later that afternoon, the massive HVAC unit next to my cage suddenly malfunctions. It began blasting freezing cold air directly at my desk. The temperature dropped rapidly. It was 40 degrees in my office within an hour. I knew it wasn't an accident. He was trying to freeze me out, literally. I didn't complain. I didn't go upstairs to beg for a heater. I put on my heavy winter coat, pulled on a pair of wool gloves, and kept dialing. My breath fogged in the air as I spoke to clients, but my voice remained steady. Every sale I made was a log on the fire that kept me warm. I couldn't do this alone. I had the sales, but I needed a shipping route. Silas monitored the digital logistics dashboard, so if I scheduled a pickup through the system, he would see it and block it. I went to the loading dock at 6 in the morning, long before the executives in their suits arrived. I found Manny, the dock foreman I had hired 5 years ago. Manny looked tired. He hated Silas because Silas had cut the overtime pay for the dock workers. I told Manny the truth. I'm selling the old inventory to save my job, Manny. But I need to move it off the books. Manny looked at the shipping manifest I had handwritten. He spat on the ground. If you label these as scrap removal, they bypass the digital tracking system, he whispered, looking over his shoulder. The system thinks we are throwing away trash, so it doesn't flag it for approval. We made a deal. My shipments went out the back door, labeled as garbage, while the checks came in via snail mail to a P.O. box I set up. We were running a ghost operation right under Silas's nose. 2 weeks in, and I had sold 20% of the inventory. I was hitting numbers, but I couldn't report them yet. If Silas saw revenue appearing in the system now, he would simply absorb it into the general fund, claim credit for finding efficiencies, and fire me anyway. I had to hide the money until the very end. I read the company bylaws again. I found a clause that allowed department heads to park revenue in a holding account until the quarter officially ended. It was meant for pending contracts, but I used it for finalized sales. I was stockpiling cash in an account Silas didn't even know existed. The balance grew every day, 10,000, 20,000, 50,000. Every day, Silas passed me in the hallway on his way to lunch. Found a new job yet, Audrey? He would ask with a smirk. I would look down at my shoes, feigning defeat. Still trying, Silas. It's hard out there. I had to play the victim. I had to let him believe he was winning so he wouldn't look too closely at what was happening in the basement. Disaster almost struck on a Tuesday. One of the old guard clients, a man named Henderson, called the main corporate support line by mistake instead of my direct line. He asked for Audrey in the basement. The call got routed to Silas's secretary, Jessica. Jessica was ambitious and cruel, a mini Silas in training. She came down to the basement, her heels clicking loudly on the concrete floor. "Who is Henderson, and why is he asking for vintage parts?" she demanded, crossing her arms. My heart hammered against my ribs. If she told Silas I was active, the game was over. I forced a tired sigh. "He's an angry ex-customer, Jessica. He called to scream at me. I'm just handling his complaints so he doesn't sue the company." Jessica looked at me with disdain. She saw the coat, the gloves, and the dusty boxes. She bought the lie. "Well, keep the trash away from the real business, Audrey. We don't need that noise upstairs." She turned and left. I slumped against the wall, shaking. It was too close. I needed to be more careful. Upstairs, Silas's new project Ether was launching. It was supposed to be the future of the company. But from what I heard through the vents and from Manny, it was a disaster. The software was buggy, the clients were confused, and the subscription renewals were dropping. I could hear shouting matches drifting down through the ventilation shafts. Silas was blaming the engineering team for his own lack of vision. Meanwhile, down in the freezing basement, my operation was seamless. My clients were happy because the old product actually worked. They didn't need updates or patches. They just needed a tool that did the job. It was a stark contrast, the bloated, broken future upstairs versus the reliable, discarded past downstairs. I realized this wasn't just about money anymore, it was about competence. Silas was destroying the company's reputation while I was quietly rebuilding it from the scraps he threw away. I worked with a renewed sense of purpose. I wasn't just saving myself, I was saving the customers. I was running out of hours in the day. To keep up with the orders, I started staying until midnight. The night security guard, old Earl, let me stay. He was a kind man who had worked there for 30 years. He brought me coffee from the break room that I wasn't allowed to enter. "That guy upstairs is a jerk," Earl said one night, shaking his head. He tried to cut the night shift security budget to save a few pennies. Earl became my eyes and ears. He watched the elevator for me. He told me that Silas was planning an early review to fire me at the 45-day mark instead of the full 90 days. "He's going to claim gross negligence to get you out faster," Earl warned me. "He needs a scapegoat for his failing project, and you're the target." I felt a cold knot in my stomach. I had to accelerate. I couldn't just meet the goal, I had to crush it before he could pull the trigger. I stopped sleeping. I lived on coffee and adrenaline. To survive an early review, I need undeniable leverage. I needed a whale. I dug through the oldest files I could find and found a folder for a massive construction conglomerate that had dropped us in 2018. If I could get them back, the revenue would be huge. I called the contact. They needed 5,000 units, more than I had left in the basement. I was stuck. I couldn't sell what I didn't have. But then I found a defunct supplier list. I called a factory in Ohio that we stopped using years ago. The owner picked up, surprised. He told me he had the parts sitting in his warehouse, unpaid for by our company when Silas switched vendors. I negotiated a desperate deal. I would pay him from my secret holding account if he shipped directly to the client. It was a logistical nightmare. I mapped it out on the back of a pizza box, calculating shipping times and margins. If the shipment was late, I lost the money and my job. I authorized the transfer. It was a gamble, but I was all in. Day 45 arrived. Silas summoned me to his office. He had the HR director present. The office was warm, a cruel contrast to my freezer in the basement. "Audrey, we're terminating the experiment," Silas said, sliding a paper across the desk. "It's clear you aren't producing. We need to cut our losses." He pushed the separation papers toward me. "Sign this, and we won't contest your unemployment." He was gloating. He thought I was broken. I didn't open my folder. I just looked at him and asked, "Is the quarter over, Silas?" He laughed. "It is for you." I stood up. "Per the agreement, I have 90 days. If you fire me now, you trigger the wrongful termination clause in my original contract, which guarantees a full year's salary." The HR director froze. Silas turned red. He didn't know about that clause. He hadn't read my file. The HR director whispered to him. Silas threw his pen at the wall. "Fine. 45 more days. Then you're dead." Silas was rattled. To cover the financial losses of his failing project, he started laying off support staff. He fired the entire legacy support team, the people who knew how the old systems worked. He thought he was saving money, but he was creating chaos. Suddenly, my phone in the basement started ringing off the hook. It wasn't my outbound calls anymore, it was inbound calls. Clients were desperate. "No one upstairs knows how to fix this," they screamed. "The support line is dead." I became the shadow support desk. I couldn't fix their software, but I could sell them the mechanical backup units that didn't need software. I started charging consulting fees to our own clients, funneling the money into the Heritage Division revenue. Silas was unknowingly driving his customers right to me. Every time he fired someone, my business grew. I was catching the people he was dropping. One of my happy clients posted on a specialized industry forum, "If you want the good gear, don't call the main line. Call the basement lady. She actually answers." The post blew up in the trade community. It went viral in our specific niche. Orders started flooding in. I couldn't handle the volume alone anymore. I recruited Manny from the loading dock and Earl the security guard to help me pack boxes at night. We formed a shadow company operating inside the corpse of the main company. We were tired, dirty, and exhilarated. We worked in a rhythm, taping boxes, printing labels, and moving pallets. Manny laughed for the first time in months. "We're making more money down here than they are up there," he said. He was right. We were a rebellion built on efficiency and respect, two things Silas knew nothing about. Silas finally found out. He was looking for someone to blame for an inventory error and saw discrepancy in the levels. He stormed down to the basement, kicking the door open. He saw the empty boxes. He saw the packing slips on the floor. "You're stealing company property," he screamed, his face turning purple. He called security, a new guard, not Earl. Escort her out. I'm pressing charges. This was the low point. I was dragged out of the building in front of the staff, pleading that I sold them, I didn't steal them. Silas didn't listen. He locked the basement. He seized all the records. I stood on the sidewalk, shivering without my coat, watching the doors close. It looked like it was over. He had won. He was going to paint me as a thief to hide his own failures. I felt a tear finally roll down my cheek. I had worked so hard, and now I was going to jail. I sat in my car, blocked from the building, my hands gripping the steering wheel. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. I expected a call from a lawyer. Instead, it was an email from the board of directors. My heart stopped. Silas hadn't just seized the records, he had sent the theft report directly to the board to justify my immediate firing. But in his rage, he hadn't looked at the numbers on the packing slips. The board chairman, a no-nonsense man named Mr. Sterling, had reviewed the attachment. He saw the revenue totals attached to the stolen goods. The email wasn't a termination notice. It was a summons. Report to the boardroom at 9 tomorrow morning. Bring your full report. Silas had accidentally reported my success. He was so eager to destroy me that he handed the board the evidence of my victory. I wiped my face. I started the car. I walked back into the building the next morning. Silas was in the lobby, looking smug. He thought I was there for my exit interview. Here to beg for mercy? He asked. Here to clarify, I said simply. We entered the boardroom together. The entire board was there, sitting in silence. Silas launched into a tirade immediately. He paced around the room, talking about my rogue operation and insubordination. He claimed I undermined his authority and operated a black market out of the basement. He painted me as a criminal who stole assets. Mr. Sterling listened quietly, his face unreadable. When Silas finally stopped for a breath, Sterling turned to me. Audrey, is it true you sold obsolete inventory without VP approval? The room held its breath. Yes, I said calmly. I did so under the Autonomous Operations Clause for zero-budget divisions. I slid a flash drive across the table to Mr. Sterling. I didn't steal assets. I liquidated dead stock that was costing us money to store. Here is the bank statement for the holding account. Mr. Sterling plugged the drive in and opened the file on the main screen. The number appeared in bold black text. The room gasped. $3.2 million. In 80 days. Pure profit. No marketing cost. No overhead. Silas's face drained of all color. He looked like he had been punched in the gut. He had reported a $4 million loss for his division in the same period. My basement operation had almost covered his entire deficit. That's impossible, Silas stammered. She's cooking the books. Silas panicked. He needed to find a flaw. She used unapproved vendors, he shouted. She violated compliance. Those mechanical units were recalled 5 years ago for safety checks. She just sold dangerous equipment to our clients. He was grasping at straws, but it was a dangerous accusation. If the board thought I created a massive liability, the money wouldn't matter. The room got tense. Mr. Sterling looked concerned. Compliance is non-negotiable, Audrey. Did you ship uncertified goods? Silas smirked, he thought he found the kill switch. He leaned back in his chair, confident that he had trapped me. She put the company at risk, he said smoothly. We have to fire her to protect ourselves from lawsuits. I anticipated this, I said, my voice cutting through the tension. I pulled a thick binder from my bag. I had every single unit recertified by an independent inspector before shipment. I opened the binder and pointed to the bottom of the inspection certificates. And I had the VP of Operations sign off on them. Silas frowned. I never signed those. I projected the document on the screen. There, at the bottom, was Silas's signature. The room went silent. Flashback to weeks ago, I had slipped the inspection forms into a stack of routine paperwork Silas was blindly signing while he was on a call. He was so lazy he didn't even read what he was approving. You signed off on the safety of the very products you are now claiming are dangerous, I said. So either they are safe, or you were negligent in your duties. I had trapped him with his own laziness. He stared at his signature, mouth open, unable to speak. The board was looking at Silas with open disgust, but I wasn't done yet. I had one final card to play. There's one more thing, I said. The automatic promotion clause. I projected the employment contract on the screen. Any director who outperforms the flagship division by a margin of 200% or more is automatically eligible for a seat on the strategy committee. I didn't just beat the target, I said, my voice steady and strong. I beat Silas. I pulled up the comparison chart. My basement operation, with zero budget and a landline phone, had made more profit than his entire tech division with millions in resources. By the bylaws of this company, I am now his equal. Mr. Sterling looked from me to Silas. Silas was sweating profusely now, stammering about long-term vision and brand alignment. He looked small. Sterling held up a hand to silence him. The numbers don't lie, Silas. And neither do the clients. Sterling pressed a button on the speakerphone. He played a voicemail from the CEO of the construction conglomerate, the whale I had landed. The voice filled the room. I just want to say, thank God for Audrey. If she hadn't fixed this, we were dropping your contract entirely. She's the only reason we're still doing business with you. Silas realized then that the client he thought was dead was actually the company's biggest account. I didn't just make money, I saved the client relationships he had destroyed. The silence in the room was absolute. The ending was swift and brutal. 2 security guards entered the room, the same guards who had dragged me out the day before. Mr. Sterling nodded at Silas. We accept your resignation, Silas. Effective immediately. Silas stood up, shaking. He tried to argue, but the guards took his arms. He was escorted out, sputtering excuses, stripped of his badge in front of everyone. Sterling turned to me, a rare smile on his face. The strategy committee seat is yours, Audrey. What's your first move? I looked at the glass wall where I could see the city skyline, and imagined the basement doorway down below. First, I said, we move the Heritage Division out of the basement. And I'm promoting Manny from the loading dock to Director of Logistics. I walked out of the conference room, head high. I didn't look back at Silas. I had work to do. And this time, I had the budget to do it right.